The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on which time zone you're joining us from. Thanks very much for joining us, and welcome to itSynergy's monthly Hacking the Human Security series. Today, our topic is, social engineering. So let's dive right in and get started. So first of all, let me give you a little bit of background on itSynergy. Talk a little bit about our why, which is why we do what we do, why we're here. And the phrase that we use is creating positive experiences with technology. So what does that mean? Well, do you remember how it felt maybe when you got that new cell phone for the first time, or maybe a new tech gadget, or maybe somebody showed you an app that you hadn't seen before, it did something really cool, and you saw that for the first time and you said, wow, this is awesome, this is really cool, I can really use that a lot. That moment, when you have that wow moment and that feeling, that is a positive experience with technology. And so the reason that we all get out of bed every morning and come to work is to try to create those positive experiences with technology with the people around us and the people that we work with. And so that's why we do what we do. So why are we here today? Well, let me start out with some statistics. In 2014, IBM did a study that found that 95% of all security incidents involve some sort of human error. In 2015, that was followed up by a couple of studies, one by CompTIA, which found that human error accounts for 52% of the root cause of security breaches, and also Experian with a study that said employees and negligence are the leading cause of security incidents but remain the least reported issue. And so clearly, based on these statistics, there is an issue with the human element of our technology systems, and that is causing a large portion, over 50%, of the security breaches that are experienced in the world. And so our goal in the next 14 minutes is to give you some quick action items to help you be security smart and not become a victim and not be the cause of some type of a cyber attack, and to make you more aware of the cybersecurity world. And I would encourage you to join us on the second Thursday of every month at 11:30 a.m. Arizona time for a new 15-minute topic. We're here every month. So with that, ready, set, go. Today we are going to talk about social engineering. So what specifically is the problem with social engineering? Well, what I thought I'd start out doing is just giving a definition of social engineering. This is my own definition. This is by no means official. This is just what I came up with to describe social engineering in English, which is social engineering is the use of techniques designed to mirror normal processes and behavior in order to maliciously trick the victim into taking an action or providing information under false pretenses. And so how bad is the problem? Well, there were some studies done just recently that found that 60% of organizations were or may have been the victim of at least one targeted social engineering attack in the past year. And of those, 65% of the people who were attacked say that the employees' credentials were compromised as a result. So in other words, as a result of this social engineering attack, the bad guys were able to capture the victim's username and password, which they can then use for nefarious purposes from that point forward. And even more concerning is that financial accounts were breached in 17% of those attacks. And so now we're talking about something that is leading directly to financial gain for the bad guys. And so clearly this problem is on the rise. And so you say, I'm in. What can I do to combat social engineering? Well, the first thing you need to do is be able to recognize what a social engineering attack looks like. And so what I thought I would start out by doing is talk about some of the more common types of social engineering attacks and sort of briefly describe what each one is. And then we'll go through and talk about some techniques that you can utilize to combat these types of attacks. So the first one is phishing. This one's fairly common these days. Most people are familiar with this. This is when somebody sends you an email that purports to be something it is not, and usually they are attempting to induce you to perform some sort of behavior, whether that's opening an attachment, clicking on a link, possibly entering some credentials, usernames, passwords, that type of thing. That's what phishing is. The next one is tailgating. This one is very common with access to secured areas, and so if you can imagine to get into your office in the morning or possibly even to your house or the garage or whatever else, you may have to scan a card or insert a card or something like that in order to gain access to a secured area. Tailgating is the phenomenon when somebody comes up behind you during your entry point to that secured area and just slips in right behind you without scanning their badge. And so you can imagine, so a lot of people say, well, you know, I would see them. They would never be able to do that. But if you think about it, a lot of times if you're walking into an office building, you scan your badge and open the door, someone could run up behind you and say, oh, wait, can you hold the door? And to be nice, you'll hold the door for them, not realizing that what you've just done is enable a tailgating attack because they didn't have to scan their badge in order to get the door open. Impersonation is the next type of social engineering attack. Obviously, people can impersonate someone on the phone. You can also have in-person impersonation as well, where somebody pretends to be something that they're not. So for example, they might pretend to be someone from the internet provider. Here in Arizona, we have, for example, CenturyLink and Cox. So someone may pretend to be a copier repairman, possibly a delivery person, any of these types of things where someone is impersonating someone that they are not, and they are using that impersonation in order to try to gain access or information from the victim. Pretexting is the next one. Pretexting is when a bad guy creates a fake scenario in order to induce you to conduct some type of behavior. So the most obvious example of pretexting that we're all familiar with and all wise to today is the example of the email that we've all gotten from our long-lost relative in Nigeria who has $10 million and they're just trying to find a way to get it out of the country and they need your help, and by helping they will cut you in for a generous portion of the proceeds. And so they've created this whole scenario, and ultimately what they're trying to do is capture your bank information so that they can steal your money. The next one is called the corner game. So this is one that's used frequently with delivery people. So if you can imagine standing outside a business or a building or something like that that's receiving a delivery, and as the delivery person walks up, you say, oh, hey, is that for ABC Company? And the delivery person says yes, and they say, oh, the guy who needs that's just right around the corner here. Let me just take you over there. And basically what they're doing is redirecting the delivery of the package improperly. And then, you know, there are a number of reasons that they might want to do that. One is just simply to steal what's in the package, but two is maybe they've ordered some stolen goods and have them shipped to a legitimate address, but in order to get their hands on it, they use a corner game attack in order to get their hands on the stolen goods that they've ordered, possibly even with a stolen credit card. Next one is called phishing. This is similar to phishing, except this one involves voicemail and phone systems. And so this is the one where the bad guys will use various techniques on you in an attempt to get your voicemail credentials, your phone system credentials, or possibly even something more nefarious, which we'll talk about later, like an account number or something like that. So this is very similar to phishing, except in this case, they're trying to come in through the phone system rather than through email. Waterholing is the next one. Waterholing is where a bad guy will find a location, usually online, where people commonly congregate. And then what they will do is they will attempt to compromise that location and then get people to do things that they wouldn't normally do, but they feel comfortable doing because they're at a familiar place where people normally congregate. So an example of this might be, for example, the community that I live in has a website where we can get information on what's going on in the community, if there are events coming up, maybe there's a community-wide garage sale, whatever else. So all that information's on the website, and so that's a great example of a waterhole website because all the people in my community might visit that website on a regular basis in order to find out what's going on in the community. Well, a lot of times a site like that, a community site like that, is possibly not well maintained and well secured, and so the bad guys are able to compromise it. And then when the residents of my community go and visit the site, maybe the bad guy attempts to get you to put in a password or an account number or some other type of valuable information. And because you're at your community site, which is a familiar location, you feel comfortable doing that, whereas just on the open internet, you might not. And so that's a waterholing attack. The next one is called baiting. This one we will talk about specifically. This is where bad guys will attempt to bait you with something in order to attack you. So the best example of this is a bad guy who maybe leaves a USB key lying on the ground in the parking lot, and as you're walking into your office, you see that and you think, oh, somebody's lost their USB key, let me pick this up. And then when you get into your office, you plug it into the computer because you want to see who it belongs to and return it to its rightful owner, at which point you have just been compromised. And so we'll talk more about that as we go later on. And then the last one is what's called quid pro quo, which is where a bad guy will attempt to do something for you and then ask a favor in return. And that favor in return is something that will allow them to compromise your information. So now that we know all these different types of attacks, what do we do? So the first thing we want to do is, once you have detected an attack, fight it. So let's look, for example, at one of the first types of attacks we talked about, phishing. I have a couple of samples of phishing here. This is one I actually just got yesterday. This is one I hadn't seen before. As you can see, it says it comes from the police department, and it tells me I've gotten a parking ticket, and that I can click there to download and print my parking ticket, and then I need to pay my parking ticket either online or by calling. As you can imagine, if I was to click on that link, my computer would be compromised, and so that's not a link we want to click on. But I thought this was a particularly intelligent social engineering attack, because when I first got this and I saw I got a parking ticket, my reaction was anger. I didn't get a parking ticket. What is this about? And then I sort of settled down and said, wait a minute, this is obviously a phishing attack. And so first example of phishing. Next one is, this one is purports to come from USAA and says that a money transfer has just been sent to my USAA account. You can see that this looks somewhat realistic in terms of it's got the USAA logo, it's got the Facebook, the Twitter logo, all these types of things. And it's got a link that I can click to approve my transfer, although you'll notice approve your transfer has a typo in it, which is a dead giveaway that this is a phishing message. But nonetheless, another example. And then the final one here is something that purports to come from the help desk and says, please read the attached message from the help desk administrator. So this one's a little different in that it's not trying to get me to click on a link, but instead is trying to get me to open an attached file. But that's equally as dangerous as clicking on a link. And so I can be just as easily compromised by opening that document as I could be by clicking on a link. So the next thing that we want to do to combat social engineering attacks is to challenge credentials. And so if people are telling you that they are someone or that they are with a copier repair company or the internet company like we talked about earlier, just ask to see their ID. And then if they show you an ID, take a picture or a photocopy of it. A social engineering attack that's launched, especially one that's launched in person, that attacker's greatest fear is that they're going to get caught, because they're taking a tremendous risk by exposing themselves to you personally, and so the worst thing that could happen to them is they get caught. And so if you start asking these things like asking for ID and then taking a photocopy of it, they're going to get very nervous and oftentimes will abandon the attack. And then you can also contact the organization as well. So if the person says they're from XYZ Copier Company, call XYZ Copier Company and ask if they've sent a technician out and what that technician's name is to verify it. And by doing these things, you're going to help to defeat a couple of attacks that we've talked about. Obviously the impersonation attack, because a lot of times you'll just scare the attacker away. And then also the corner game can be defeated by this as well. So ask for some ID for the person that's telling you to redirect the delivery of the package. Always be aware of your surroundings. So don't just accept what a bad guy or a potential bad guy is presenting to you to be nice. Ask questions nicely instead. So for example, we talked earlier about tailgating. So it doesn't mean that you can't hold the door for someone or that you can't be courteous for someone, but just hold the door and say, hey, would you mind scanning your badge as well, so that you can verify that they actually have access to that area the same way that you have access to that area. When it comes to baiting, a very common attack technique for baiting is to call a bunch of users within a company and say you're calling from the help desk and you're returning the call about the ticket that they submitted. Well, eventually, if you call enough people, you're probably going to find one that has submitted a ticket. And so that's a great example of baiting. And with that type of attack with the help desk, or also we talked earlier about the USB key with baiting, report it to the IT department and do not attempt to resolve it on the own. So if you pick up a USB key out of the parking lot, take that to the IT pro, your in-house IT folks, or whatever resources you have, and let them work on returning it to its rightful owner and diagnosing whether it's valid or not. Don't attempt to do that on your own. trust but verify. So if you get a call, ask if you can call right back, and then just look up the number independently. So someone says they're calling from the help desk, for example, just ask if you can call right back and look in your company directory for the proper number for the help desk. Don't call the number that they give you, because that may be a false number. Don't feel it's safe to do something you wouldn't normally do just because your surroundings are familiar. So I talked earlier about the website for my community. Just like you wouldn't enter your password for something on any random site on the internet, don't feel safe entering your password or an account number or a PIN number or any of those types of things on a site just because it is a familiar site to you. Because the fact that it's familiar doesn't mean necessarily that it hasn't been compromised. Don't click links, just manually go to the website. So in the USAA example I gave earlier, rather than clicking that link, just go out to the USAA website manually on your own without clicking on a link, and then log in normally. And if there's information that the bank is trying to communicate to you or business that you need to conduct, you can conduct it at that point rather than going in through the link. And then go low tech. Just pick up the phone and call a person. We had a customer a week ago that got an email that said it came from DocuSign and said click here to read your lease agreement, and that was actually a phishing email, and that was an invalid link. So if you get an email from DocuSign, just pick up the phone, call the person that sent it to you and say, hey, did you send me a contract to sign via DocuSign? And if they say, yeah, I did, I need you to sign that, then great, you've verified it independently, so that's perfect. Don't give up any of your secrets. So just because you are talking to an IVR or a phone system, IVR stands for interactive voice response, that's just the, press 1 for this, press 2 for that type system. Don't give up any of your information like an account number or PIN number, etc., because a lot of times the bad guys will set up fake IVR systems to tempt you to input a voicemail password, an account number, that type of thing, and really they're just trying to capture that information. Don't try to help a person or a caller. So for example, if your help desk is calling you, are you expecting that call? This is the quid pro quo attack that we talked about earlier. And if somebody just is asking for information like, hey, I'm trying to get a hold of so-and-so, what's their extension? Don't help that person or caller, because that could be an attacker that's gathering information to launch an attack. And don't give out that information until that person's identity is verified. Finally, you want to trust your gut. The expression that I always use is listen to your spidey sense. So if your gut is telling you something's not right, something's probably not right, and so you need to listen to that. If there's an offer that comes in through email or through the telephone that it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And so just be wary of that. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And then I always advocate using the sandwich analogy, which is something that was put out by Microsoft years ago, which is essentially if a stranger walked up to you on the street and offered you a sandwich, you probably wouldn't take it. If your best friend just showed up unexpectedly at your office for lunch one day and offered you a sandwich, you might take it, but you'd be a little suspicious. You'd be like, hey, what are you doing here? We're supposed to hang out this weekend, but it's like Tuesday at lunchtime. Why are you at my office? I mean, it would just seem very weird to you, and so you would be very skeptical. On the other hand, if you had a picnic planned with your best friend at the park on the weekend and he shows up with a sandwich, of course you're going to take it. You say, hey, man, thanks for the sandwich. And so that's the sandwich analogy, is you got to consider the context. And just in general, if anything seems off, if your spidey sense is going off, if your gut is telling you something's not right, something's probably not right. And so just listen to that, because a lot of times our intuition is correct. So with that, I'm a couple minutes over. My apologies. Thank you very much for joining us. Our next webinar is coming up on May 11th at 11:30 a.m. Arizona time. Our registration is live right now at itsynergy.com/webinar. Next month's topic is summer vacation tips, because we're getting into May. Kids are getting ready to get out of school. Everybody's getting ready to head out for that summer vacation. And so we're going to get you kind of tuned up and ready for that from a cybersecurity standpoint before you leave. Our webinars are the second Thursday of every month at 11:30 a.m. There I am. There's my contact information. And then finally, I'd encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we put recorded versions of all these webinars, both past and present. And you can find that at itsynergy.com/YouTube. So with that, I will wrap it up. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a wonderful day.